Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
We
guess who's back? You know what I'm
live.
saying? You know, I always want, man. I'm angry at YouTube. Well, actually, now I can't be mad at them, right? But I want to be able to play some songs, man. But if we do them, we gonna
I
get
know.
flagged, and they
I
gotta.
know.
I can't be mad though. If it was my music, I'd want to be paid for it,
For
right? So
sure.
I
It
can't.
makes sense. It makes sense.
Ladies and
There's a
gentlemen, welcome to
release.
Cross Examine. You know what I'm saying? We talk rap, we talk life, we talk social media, we talk Christ, we talk everything and got
Ain't
proof
got proof.
because we're cross examined and you
And
can't handle the truth.
that's right.
Man, we're going to be dropping some truth bombs today. We're going to get into it, ladies and gentlemen. You know how we are. We back to the grill again. The grill
Grill
again.
again.
Back to the grill again. The grill again. This is season 4, episode 27. I'm Kirk Kennedy, your favorite co-host, Dr. Wolverine. And we are here,
y'all.
man. We here, man. Let's talk reality right now. Let's talk real quick right now. NBA playoffs, game 6 right now.
It's about to be crazy.
It's about to be crazy. This I ain't been this excited since Jordan was playing the Utah Jazz in game 6.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So I'm excited for this, man. What you think is going to happen tonight?
Ooh, I mean, I don't know, bro. I mean, how can you call it? Like, it's, I guess the obvious one would be Boston wins, takes them to game 7, and everybody makes more money, and we get to watch more basketball.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's the obvious one. That's probably what I'm going to go with.
Right.
Either way, we should be in for another entertaining game. Like, these dudes have been balling. You know what I'm saying? They've been balling. So
yeah, they've been balling. It's been good. I
been
personally
real good.
would like to see the Warriors win it in 7, just to be in that home arena. It's different when you win in somebody else's arena. You know what I'm saying? Like it's cool, but it's not like the crowd. You know, it's just a different vibe. You know, so I'd love to see. So I wouldn't mind in the game 7, also because I've been enjoying this series. I wouldn't mind seeing that happen. You know what I'm saying? So, but we start that game starts at 9. So guess what? We will be done by 9, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching,
that's right. Final number 9.
All right, let me key you in. So earlier today, I released my latest Substack article. It is called "Why Black Lives Matter Was Successful." Now, on the actual article, "successful" is in quotations because we all know that they have been exposed for, at least the leadership, the top leadership, Patrice Cullors, and those people have been exposed as being corrupt. So successful has quotations around it because obviously I'm not saying they were successful like they weren't corrupt. But we have to be honest. In the last 8 years, Black Lives Matter has been a household name and sort of took the world by storm. Facts. So in this article, I tried to explain why did that happen? How did a couple of Black women who started a hashtag in March of 2013 become an international multi-million-dollar movement?
Right.
And I explained how in the article.
It may hurt people to hear somebody say them being successful. Black Lives Matter was successful. Like, I mean, it gives you that kind of like what you mean?
Yeah, some people, that's why I put in quotation. And I mean, the title might even throw some people off and be like, what are you saying?
But you can't deny it. I mean, you can't deny if success is measured by finances, financial gain, like
corporate awareness,
financially. Like that corporate awareness, like everybody knew about them. The marketing standard was crazy. Hashtag game. What hashtag was bigger? I mean,
crazy.
They were successful.
Man, they created a movement. Even if you're anti-woke, right? It's a multi-million-dollar. Even if you wrote books against it, like like Vody, Owen Stratt,
everybody was talking about them.
Is all people were talking about. They are an American success story. Listen. If Larry Flint in Hustler magazine, right, or Hugh Hefner in Playboy, straight up and down sinfulness, right?
Right.
Straight up and down hedonism, right? If that is an American success story, then so is Black Lives Matter,
Facts.
whether you like it or not.
Facts.
They are American, in a
Drum line,
country that prizes
please.
itself by capitalism and corporate entities and corporate awareness and sponsorship. You have to tip your hat to Black Lives Matter. Them women
Facts.
hustled people and got paid and got away with it, as far as I know.
Yeah, they sure did. They sure
As
did.
far as I know. But I talk about why it was successful. And in other words, why were you and I talking about it? By you and I
Right.
don't mean just me and Strack. I mean, everyone was talking about whether you love them or hate them, you cannot deny that. So the link is in the description. I would love for you check out the article. It's not too long. And then give me your thoughts on it. We'd love to have you check that out. All right. What a difference a day makes. Man, oh man. This is crazy. All right. First of all, shouts to my homie Ruslan. All right.
Yeah,
Ruslan
facts.
is my dude. We've been growing in the friendship, man, since last year. And I appreciate that, brother. I mean, Ruslan, I would say, humanly speaking, is responsible for us even having a show on YouTube because we've always just done the traditional podcast model and we've
Right.
had success there. We still have people that listen to, download our podcast and from Apple, Spotify, wherever people
Right.
get podcasts from. We've been doing this for a few years. But Ruslan was the one telling me after I did an interview on his show in August, man, you need to be on the YouTube game. And I was
Right.
like, so I was going to take his course. He was going to let me get his course and look at it. And I ended up not getting a chance to do it, but we decided to launch that anyway. And we had our little hiccups.
I mean, it's
I'm
something we
not
had
one of,
talked about doing already, and then he
we
just
did
kind of
though.
gave you that kick. You
Yeah,
know what I'm
he gave us
saying?
that push. He gave me the
Yeah,
push to
for
start a
sure.
YouTube channel. Even though, truth be told, spoiler alert, we haven't been the most faithful to even promote this joint. So
Nah.
I haven't really gone. I thought I would be more, but I'm just busy. I got a lot going on. This isn't what I do for a living, so I don't give as much attention to it. But having said that, on Wednesday, I did sometimes I do a Kurt's Corner where I might take 20, 30 minutes and just think out loud. And then people watch those and like them. And so Ruslan happened to see that one and he banged with the material that I was saying. He put it in his community page on YouTube, and boy, did a bunch of stuff happen. So, that's the type of
You,
stuff
you
you can
you
do
got the
when you got.
camera on going like, oh boy, oh boy.
Now, for real, man, that's the type of stuff that happens when you just got a lot of influence, when you got a big channel. So,
Yeah, you just get a
shouts to
salute,
YouTube,
man.
man. Shouts to Ruslan, bro. Good
Word
dude,
up.
man. Didn't have to do that. Didn't ask him to do that. He just thought
Right, right.
the material was good, and so we've gotten in 2 days over 500 subscribers.
Facts.
The video is approaching 10,000 views for us. Like I said, I don't do a lot of that stuff, so I'm encouraged. So first of all, thank you if you are a new YouTube subscriber. Thank you for jumping on. We got some stuff for you. We got some stuff we're gonna talk about for you. Also, man, thank you for those who just the comment section was crazy.
Word.
Only had one bad comment. I mean, I responded to every comment, like thanks for watching, whatever, because it's good to interact with. And I appreciate that people took time out of their schedules to listen to me talk for 30 minutes or so, right?
Right.
Lot of comments, man. I was blown away by, and I'm not going to share them because it sounds like I'm humble bragging. But I will say the one negative comment I got was someone said, "I'm a Christian and this is a waste of my time." So I just said,
he's
"Hey,
probably not alone in that sentiment. You know what I'm saying? There's probably a lot of those that would feel the same way.
yeah."
If
So
not, we
I
wouldn't
just
be talking about it.
right. Well, I just said, "Hey, man, thanks for letting me know, and don't forget to hit that dislike button." You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, I don't care about that stuff, man, because I'm not
Right.
in this day and age. I don't say stuff so that everybody agrees. I say what
Nah.
I feel, and I say what I think is true. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Like I get it. Like I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
We passed that. I'm over it. I never been a dude that's been bound by that, but now even more so in the cultural climate that we in. But I want to thank you, man. Thank you. Welcome all you subscribers. You'll see a lot more content. Me and Strack do this show once a week, live Thursday nights, streaming here. And then you can follow us on, if you listen to podcasts, you can listen to it on the audio side of things, wherever you listen to podcasts, that's there. And then I do sporadic thinking out loud, Kurt's corners throughout the
Right.
week, just things that come into my mind. So But I appreciate you, man. Thank you. Real quick, for those of you that didn't watch it, just a brief summation. I just basically talked about how Ben Shapiro was livid with Fox News because they are promoting a story of a family who's who has a trans son. So it's a daughter that they've basically said when he was little that they transitioned to a girl. And Ben Shapiro was livid. This is Fox News. How could they do this? And blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I just pushed back and said, listen, me and Strack been telling y'all the whole time. Like this is the reality. It's just there is they when you keep calling something the leftist agenda, right? Or this, you miss the bigger biblical picture. Believers should not be thinking in terms theolitical, right? Theology, I believe in God, but political, theolitical, right? We should be thinking in these theolitical terms. That's a different gospel. Where now it's the problems of the left, the problems of the right. Like the Bible says, the problems are really the enemy. We don't wrestle with flesh and blood, and that's what this does. And so he was offended, and I was like, man, if you're a conservative, man, pay attention, like focus, like look. I'm not saying vote your conscience. Don't get me wrong. The point wasn't let's bag on conservatives. Nah, not at all. I bang with conservatives. I'm not a liberal or conservative. I'm just me. I don't vote for nobody anymore because it's too vitriolic. But the point was pay attention. Like Christians, I'm talking to believers. What the world does, the world's going to do. But believers, be careful because the Bible says that Satan is behind everything, and that the world's going to rise up against those who believe in Jesus. And they're not going to say, hey, oh, you a conservative? Okay, we with you. Nah. If you with
Yeah, nah,
Christ,
that ain't
they're not going to
happening.
be with you. That ain't happening. So you can check that video out. That video did its thing. It's been crazy, and I'm grateful for that. But we got to keep it moving. So today's show, we're going to talk about almost like a part 2 of that video, but furthermore, a breakdown of how we got to this place, right? And so this episode is called The Imposition and the Incarnation, and you'll understand what that means in just a moment. But the imposition is sort of the main strategy for what what we see happening in the evangelical church. Obviously, not in every corner of the church, but in significant segments of the American evangelical church, what we're seeing is this imposition. It's what we've called theological gospel, where you and let me make sure you understand the difference between Strack and I's understanding. There's a lot of talk about Christian nationalism. We're not talking about Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is largely talking about conservatives who support Trump and all of that stuff. We're talking about something that's way deeper than Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism
I
to
think
me,
it's a broader category as well. It's
what
broader.
Christian nationalism or
Now,
theological?
what we're talking about right now,
Yeah,
theolitical. Yeah.
theological is a broader and deeper category. Christian nationalism would be like a creek, and what we're talking about is an ocean, right?
Right.
So it's not. I'm not shaming anybody who's a Christian. I have some guys I follow on Twitter. I think they're on point. They say some good stuff, but we're not talking about. It's not another name for Christian nationalism. Theolitical is another gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's fusing American dream morality or ideas with constitutional morality, the amendments, fusing them into biblical morality, right? Almost
Right.
treating the American dream and the Constitution and taking bits of that and bringing it into your identity and part of the process of sanctification, right? Which is to be like Christ. We're talking about bringing all that in. This is what
Right.
theological is way deeper. Christian nationalism is about supporting Trump and maybe white supremacy. Theological is a way that the church has been so tethered to the political system, even to the point where I would say, we've said this on the show before, that you looking to the government for hope. Like I think the church,
Right.
because of slavery, because of racism, because of treatment of women, because of all these things, the church punted hundreds of years ago on its witness. And now growth, change, and hope got imported to the government. So the church
Right.
has been politically connected for a long time. That
That's what makes
separation of
this
church and state is a fallacy.
that's what makes this topic much broader is because it incorporates all sides. It doesn't matter what side you're on, you are subject to being theolitical. Like that's you can become theolitical.
100%, yeah. And that's the other thing. So I'm glad you said that. Theolitical is not like the conservatives only, right?
Mm-hmm.
Theolitical is everyone can be. I think there's left is theolitical. It's when I put my ultimate, and people say I don't do that. Let me tell you how you know you're theolitical, because people always push back and say, "Well, I don't do that. I don't put my ultimate trust in this." If the morality that comes from me, if I'm willing to sin consistently. We all struggle with sin, so we're not up here acting like we don't, right? I ain't got
Mm-hmm.
no stones in my hand, ain't no glass ceiling above me.
Right.
But when we are willing to consistently insult, offend, and like I said in the video, act in ways outside of Jesus, we said last week's episode, do you think you hate sin more than Jesus? You don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? You do not. None of us do. No one hates sin more than Jesus, right? So then the
Right.
question becomes, then why do we act in ways towards sinners that Jesus didn't? That's how you know you're theolitical. When I'm more afraid, listen, when you're more afraid of what's happening in the country than you are confident in God's sovereignty over what's happening in the country, that's theolitical.
Yeah.
That means your hope is in whatever political system that you're a part of. And people don't like that, man. People don't like it. They want you to choose a side. And we have chosen one. We chose the side that Jesus' spirit went in. We
Mm-hmm.
stay in balance for that reason. So we're going to get into this concept, the imposition. Now, to understand the imposition, you got to understand the incarnation, right? So we're going to break this down right now. To understand this, we have to give you sort of a theory of the incarnation. All right. So the incarnation, make sure we're all on the same page. It's basically a theological word to describe Jesus being fully God, becoming a human being, right?
Right.
So Jesus, fully God, he condescends, he humbles himself, and takes on the form of a human body. And not only that, but he doesn't allow himself to have the full access of his abilities as God so that he can truly experience what it's like to be a human being. So things like he had to learn wisdom, the scripture tells us, right? So Jesus came in the form of a baby, which means he had to be potty trained. That means, so here's the thing, poopy diapers aren't necessarily sinful. Even though my kids, when they were little, I felt like their butts were demonic. My son Vanito had sinful diapers, I'm sure. But Jesus had to be potty trained. He had to walk.
Yeah.
Jesus farted. That's just a part of humanity. Jesus burped. None of that is sinful. So I imagine Jesus sitting with his disciples and he, Rabbi, I'm sure that happened. I guarantee that happened. Jesus was a human being. He did. Jesus let some rip, and I'm sure it didn't say nothing until they smelled it. So these things, Jesus was a human being that didn't allow himself. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is when it says he marveled at their lack of faith. Right?
Right.
Jesus was shocked. Like, wait a minute. After I just did this, I just healed this, I just gave this man who was born blind sight, and y'all still don't believe? I
Right.
mean, they say he marveled. He was like, wow, y'all are tripping. So
That's right.
I love that stuff. So the incarnation is Jesus becoming a human being. But we have to remember, Jesus became like us to make us become more like him. Right?
Yes.
That was the point. That was the main point. It was like, listen, let me take on a body, let me go down there, let me live perfectly in obedience to what God's word says, because human beings cannot.
Right.
I'm going to die brutally as if I committed all the sins that all these other people did. And then I'm going to rise from the dead, showing that I was who you said I was to the Father, that our sins are truly forgiven because Jesus, death couldn't hold him. See, if he didn't rise from the dead, then people could say, look, he was a sham. You know, he
Right.
might have sinned because people only die because of sin. But because Jesus rose from the dead himself, it gave credence to the fact that this man was sinless and his sacrifice was accepted by God. He ascends to heaven, sends us his spirit, and now you and I are trying to live according to his definition of good and evil instead of our own. This is
And
sort
he
of that.
works it in
So,
us
and he
to
works it
do
in us.
so. Yeah.
So he became mortal to show us how to be moral. All
Right.
right. So this is what happens. This is part of why Jesus came. And you see this clearly. Philippians 2, 5 through 11 lays out this picture very clearly. That he came, did not count equality with God something to be grasped. All right. So that's the incarnation. Jesus become, and when people talk about incarnational ministry, right? You talk about that. That's just getting hands on, getting on the ground, going to where the people are, right? Jesus comes to where the people are, and that's the reality, right? So I like this quote. He said, Jesus wept, not Jesus ripped. I think he ripped too. They just wasn't covered. Remember what John said. There were things that Jesus did that we didn't write about. So don't act like that didn't happen. All right. So having said that, what the imposition is essentially what Strack and I are calling the uncarnation. All right. So the incarnation is God becomes in a body for the purpose of our salvation and all of that. The uncarnation is us trying to be like Jesus and influence people in a morality that's more like ours instead of more like his. So if Jesus becomes mortal so that we can live moral in the incarnation, then the uncarnation is we're mortals trying to influence people to be moral in ways that we define. Right. So
That's
this
good.
is where
That's good.
the incarnation and what the imposition really is. All right.
Yeah, I mean
This is the part that you gotta
that's what we would call self righteousness.
understand. 100%. Right.
Yeah.
We would definitely call it that way. So the incarnation is Jesus persuades us and helps us to be more like him. In the incarnation, it's we persuade others to be more like us, right? We do that. We want people to be more like us. We want us to think that way. So the imposition or the incarnation is essentially the opposite of Romans 14. It just takes Romans 14 and Thomas Jefferson's that joint. Shoo, let's rip it out of the Bible. That joint is not even there no more. So before I go further, let me just read a couple of verses of Romans 14 so you wilt know what thither I talk about. All right. This is what Romans 14 says. I'm reading from the CSB translation. You can hate me now. It says this: welcome anyone who is weak in faith, but don't argue about disputed matters. One person believes he may eat anything, while one who is weak eats only vegetables. One who eats must not look down on one who does not eat, and one who does eat must not judge one who does, because God has accepted him. Who are you to judge another's household servant? Before his own Lord he stands or falls, and he will stand because the Lord is able to make him stand. And it goes on and on and on. So essentially, Romans 14 is this idea that we're going to have different ways that we approach things because of our conscience. Mm-hmm. Our consciences are in different places. There's going to be different levels of maturity. So understand what was happening in this particular moment when Paul's writing this. You have in the church all Christians, but formally you'll have a Pharisee who did not eat anything that he wasn't supposed to. Remember in Acts 10 when God has this is God talking to Peter, right? A big sheet comes down and God tells Peter to go kill and eat. And what does Peter say? No way, Lord, I've never eaten anything in my life. Right? That was a big deal to them. So when we read this, we think, okay, who cares about eating vegetables or not? What are you, a vegan? Nah, this was a big deal to them because for them, eating vegetables or not eating vegetables, you go back to Daniel, right? Specifically vegetables. Daniel, right? Daniel is taken into captivity, and they're given. Nebuchadnezzar tells the people to feed all of them this food, but Daniel tells the chief eunuch, "Hey, listen, me and the homies, we kind of have like a little regiment that we doing, right? Just something that we eat to honor the Lord. So would you allow us to continue to eat what we normally eat? And if we're not as healthy or healthier than them dudes in 10 days, we'll eat what you eat." Lo and behold, 10 days later, these dudes are eating, right? And they was eating vegetables. So this is a big deal in Romans 14. This is not, for us, it's like, all right, do you want Doritos, Cool Ranch, or nacho cheese? And it's not a big deal. This was a big theological issue for them. And in the church, you would have someone who was a Gentile that's eating whatever, and then you'd have a Pharisee that was like, I can't eat this stuff. I'm not eating no pork. So all those things are there, right?
Plus, even just to for the sake of processing, consider how long you had to commit to what you were going to eat. at
Hmm.
that time. The process of creating what you were going to eat was a lot longer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, well said.
all of that was involved.
Yeah, well said. That's true. So the imposition or the incarnation is the opposite of Romans 14,
Right,
right? It's the opposite. Because what it does is it says it imposes on the conscience, right? Where Romans says don't impose. I mean, if you were to sum up Romans 14 in one sentence, it would be this: do not impose on your brother or sister's conscience because you may have grace for something that they don't yet, and vice versa. So that's why he says, the one who doesn't eat, don't judge, and the one who does eat, don't judge. And then he says, which I think is a brilliant question, who are you to judge another's household servant? And he
word,
says, and because his own Lord, before his own Lord, he stands or falls, and he will stand, right? So they're saying, like, listen, you may disagree with what this person thinks, but before the Lord, they good. The Lord will make him stand. That's what he's saying. Don't impose.
facts.
Well, in the incarnation, the way that you try to persuade people to be like you is you impose on their conscience. You impose on Jesus didn't impose on our conscience. He cleansed our consciences. That's the difference. Jesus cleansed our consciences by showing us what was true and was right. And he gives
Right,
us a spirit that cleanses our consciences,
right,
sprinkles on our right?
right,
In the incarnation, the way that you make people like you is to impose on their conscience. You got to tell them that they're not really Christians if they fill in the blank.
right.
So here you have this, and one of
And
the
real
chief. Go
quick,
ahead.
that involves the reason you're saying about the conscience. It involves things that happen and occur on your daily living. So this is stuff
Mm-hmm.
that every day your thought process is intertwined by these things that would interpose upon your conscience. You know what I'm saying? That's why I mentioned about how long it took to make food, right? Because the reason I brought that up is because that would have been on their minds often and a lot throughout the day. You know what I'm saying? Like where are we going to get food from? How are we going to make this? What is legal to eat? What is not legal to eat? This would have been stuff that they would have been thinking about constantly. And that's what you use to mess with people's conscience. It's stuff they think about and are absorbed with and maybe even idolize.
100%. And I think one of the ways that we do that, particularly in the political realm. So our lens is theolitical, right? So particularly in the political realm, here's how you impose on people's conscience. Here's one of the strategies of doing that is you oversimplify very complex problems,
Yep.
right? You just oversimplify a complex issue. You just make it, oh, uh, black. You say, oh, it's black on black crime. It's fatherlessness. It's this. You just say these things, right, that are complicated. This is how you know you're theolitical, right? This is how you know when you think of the poor, like what comes to mind? How do you react to the poor? You see, in the theolitical gospel, you're kind of offended at the poor. It's like, man, why do we have to pay for these people? Because remember, the theolitical gospel fuses American dream ideology and constitutional morality. So in the American dream, it's called meritocracy, right? Everyone, if you work hard, you go to school, you don't do this, don't do that, you can be successful. That's not always true, though. That's not,
No.
you're not guaranteed to make a certain income if you follow this protocol. That's not true. But you oversimplify these things and make it seem like fusing that and not deal with the complexities and the nuance of struggle. This is why you will not find, and I challenge anyone to do this. I think I challenged this before and no one took me up on the offer. Go in your Bibles and find out where you see God specifically warning the poor like he does the rich. You won't see it. In fact, here's what it is. Jesus said this. It wasn't a socioeconomic statement, but it was still true nonetheless because Jesus said it. When the woman came, I think it was Mary or Martha. I think they said. I think it was Martha or Mary. I can't remember who they thought it was. But she comes to brings us this big jar of perfume and pours it on Jesus' feet. She starts washing it, wiping his feet with her hair. And then Judas is like, man, why are you wasting all that good perfume? You know, we could have sold that and got money for it. And Jesus said this: the poor you will always have with you. That's what he said. The poor you will always have with you. This is for my burial. Now, that wasn't a socioeconomic statement, but it was a statement spoken by the eternal God.
It was
The
reality.
poor you will always have with you, right? So if the poor will always be with us, then why are we constantly criticizing and denigrating people for being poor? Jesus said, the poor you will always have. In other words, he was saying, look, there's going to be endless opportunities to take care of the poor and help the poor. They're always going to be here. I'm not going to be here. This is for my burial. Right? They may not have understood what he meant, but they knew this is a preparation for me being about to die. The poor are going to be here long after me. You'll have time to care for them, right? But when we think about in our country, there's so much talk about the poor, and we oversimplify it as if it's just black people or this people or these people or that people. It's a way more complicated problem. But we oversimplify these things by making you almost feel stupid for thinking it's complicated. Because
Or
when it's
even
complicated, it requires grace.
even just like I think it was Judas's response, right, where he didn't he respond and say, well, "Man, we could have used that money for whatever, feed the
Yeah,
poor people,
yeah,
whatever the
right.
case may be." Even in his response, you're thinking like the simplification of things in his mind. The good thing to do is just feed the poor, right? Like what? Even if we know he was being sneaky, right? Because of
Right.
it brought out who he was. I mean, eventually we see who he is. But even in his thought process, like what is a good thing that I could say that would make me look good and make me sound right and
They call that
concerned
virtue
truly,
signaling today, right?
right? What they call that. I didn't want to use it because that's a trigger word for you. You know
Right,
what I'm saying?
right.
I didn't want to
But
use
Judas
that
was
joke,
virtue
but it's
signaling.
cool.
Right. He's
But
trying to
anyway,
virtue signal Jesus.
in his mind, he was simplifying. Yo, we could have done this, but not realizing there was a greater good that was actually being done. He was
That's right.
simplifying to judge. He was simplifying to justify even his own thoughts in the process.
Mm-hmm.
He was simplifying.
And let me tell
That's what
you
we
how
do.
it's true. And that's on point. And let me tell you how it plays out in the theological realm. When you say it's the left's fault, it's the left's fault, or
Right.
it's the right, man, it's just way more complicated than
But let me tell you how it also plays out. I mean, even in a personal life, like when we're taught hermeneutics, we're taught the plain, simple text is what governs the other texts, right? That are
that. Yeah.
a little bit more harder to understand. So
Right.
we're even taught that in hermeneutics. So of course we're going to apply that to life. And even for me as a man and just the way I normally think, I want to simplify things to break them down and build them up. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an appealing way of getting
Yeah.
into people's
Mm-hmm.
thought and their psyche on how they view the world is
Mm-hmm.
by coming to them with the simple answers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Black lives matter, but nah, all lives matter. That's
Right.
simple. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it's real
Right.
simple. You deliver that, you're avoiding having to deal with the realities that there is a real cry and all of that situation going on.
100%. And that's it. Oversimplification is the name of the game. It's
Yeah.
just like, hey, they're going to take this from you. It's just, we live in a complex society. I mean, you think about it, America is the only nation in the world that is comprised of every nation in the world.
Right.
Like, you just, like, when you come, like, everyone that's here isn't an American, right? They're not
Nah.
all Americans. Like, you get the designation of American. Like, if I go to another country, right? Say I go to France, right? I go move to Paris somewhere. I'm not going to be an American French,
Right.
American Parisian, right? I'm going to be an American no matter how long I live there. Any other country I go to, if I go move to China, I'm not going to be an American Chinese. I'm going to be American, right? But when you come to America, you are a German American, an Italian American, an African American, a Korean American, an Indian American, and
Mm-hmm.
goes on and so on and so on and so on. So you become the American gets attached to whatever identity you
You a
have.
stepchild. You a stepchild.
Basically, this happens in no other country in the world. This happens
Right.
in no other country, right? So this idea of being an American, it's not like everyone's an American. America is an idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's an idea that people come and they embrace the idea. And that's why
I mean,
American
that's
is
every
associated
government
with your name.
every government establishes an idea. I mean,
Sure,
that's
right,
why they call this the Great Project that has
right.
lasted 300
But no
plus
other
years.
government makes you take on the idea as a hyphen moniker for your identity, right?
That's
Only
hence the
America does.
Constitution. Yeah.
Right. So this is so again, So what you do is so what I'm saying is it's a complex country we live in. You got
Hmm.
people coming here that are coming for individual selfish gain. They
Right.
want the American dream applied individually. They're not
They're
thinking about
told this is where they
America
can get that.
100%, right? This is
Right.
where they can get it. So, with that being said, when we're talking about the nation and what's important and how do we oversimplify it by blaming it on the left or blaming it on the right as if those things can fix the problems. And I think this is where the church punted in many ways because the only thing that we need to blame it on or cry out to for solutions is the Lord.
Right.
Can you imagine if there were genuine, heartfelt millions of people praying a couple times a week? I can't prove that they're not. I'm talking about a call that someone is saying, like we did this thing, the Jonah group, right?
Yeah.
Where every Tuesday and
Tuesday and
Thursday
Thursday.
at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, praying for the nation. If millions of believers did that, millions of tens of millions, God would respond to that. God does it plenty of times. He hears people say, "Oh man, the cries of my people reached heaven." So this is a serious issue. It's an oversimplification of complexity, and that's part of the strategy of how people impose on your conscience. How could you not see this, right? So you have this neo Great Commission, right? You cannot do this. So you have the neo Great Commission. So the Great Commission, which many of us know, Matthew 28, is to go into all the world and preach the gospel, right? This is what Jesus said. The neo Great Commission is different. It's go into all the church and make disciples. Right? We go into all the world and make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Neo Great Commission, the Imposition Great Commission, is to go into all the church and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of whatever political pundit you admire.
Right.
This is what's happening. This is what we're seeing happening. People aren't so think about this. How much of your church or your denomination is really set on reaching the lost? The Baptists have been given that, and there's many Baptists that do, but a lot of that stuff is revealed to be a smokescreen these days. It's like this: you missionaries are not just something that you go do overseas, and no, no, no. We're making disciples all the time, but what's happened now is now we're trying to make disciples of the church. We're not thinking about the world as much, so the world is going bonkers because we're so focused on the church. The Neo Great Commission says go into all the church and make political disciples. So you'll say stuff like you can't be a Christian and vote Democrat. You can't, if you vote Republican, you support white supremacy. All these things are happening, right? This is a different Great Commission. This is the Imposition Great Commission, the Neo Great Commission. This is not the Biblical Great Commission. We're not supposed to be, we're making disciples, sure, but that's not our mission field. The mission field are the undiscipled, the people who have yet to believe. So in this sort of theolitical, in this imposition, I impose on my brother, my fellow Christian's conscience, and that's the mission. We need to do this. We need to do this. Let me give you a case in point. Case in point. All right. So Charlie Kirk is, I think he's a believer. I don't know if he's a believer or not, right? You can't tell anymore. I think he's a believer. Maybe he is. But he runs a very influential conservative like platform called Turning Point USA. So he does a lot of stuff with Candace Owens. And most of his videos that I see on YouTube, it always says this, like in the description. Charlie Kirk destroys woke leftists, or all this stuff. So the language is just all this militaristic, right? You're fighting against people who need Jesus. So you say you believe in Jesus and you're going to war with people who need him. Right. So Charlie Kirk, I'm just going to read you this. This was on Twitter today. I'm going to read you this. Here's what it says. Now, I don't know if he's a solid believer, if he's a believer or not. All right. Let me just read you this. It was on Twitter. Announcing the first ever Turning Point USA Faith Pastor Summit. Attendees will receive first-class training and teaching from 30 plus great speakers, including fellow pastors, academics, and other thought leaders this August. Pastors and church leaders, apply today with a link. And then it has a picture of all the people that looks like they will be speakers, and none other than guys like James Lindsay, who is an avowed atheist, is going to be speaking at a pastor's conference. and they're going to be talking about, just looking at some of the people here, they're going to be talking about the left,
Right.
CRT, woke stuff, all of this stuff.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it
you're
can't be. It can't be church. It can't be theology. It can't be doctrine, sound doctrine that they're teaching because I mean, unless they're allowing atheists to teach sound doctrine now, you know what I'm saying? There's got to be
yeah,
something else that's being taught here that would be acceptable to be taught by someone who's not a Christian.
100%. So it's
So,
sound doctrine only in that I can hear the doctrine he's saying. It's not sound in that it's biblical, right?
I mean,
This
how
is
do
what's
you,
happening. This was
right?
happening, right? This is happening. You're having conferences that are politically driven and drawing pastors in to create another layer of theological. And what
That's
do?
odd.
Impose on, look at what they're doing. You're imposing politics onto the conscience of other believers and trying to train people to do that. This is what's happening.
Right.
This is America. You had to tell me this is America. This is no joke. This is America. This is what's happening. So in the Neo Great Commission, it's go into all the church and impose on people's conscience, making them disciples, right? Here's the problem. Here's the problem. If I impose on your conscience, right? If I impose on you what's right and what's wrong, if I impose on your conscience, then I control the way you understand morality.
Mm.
So if I go to this conference, this Turning Point USA conference, and I sit there for 4 days listening to men talk about the left, wokeism, all these different issues, and some of them they're going to be on point. I might agree with the things that they're saying.
For
I'm
sure.
sorry, I'm not an LGBT ally. It won't be. I'm LGBT. I'm in the alley, but I ain't no
Right.
ally, right? So it just ain't gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? It's not gonna happen. So I might agree with some of what they say, but if I'm being indoctrinated by all of this, and then they're going to probably try to use scripture to inform these political ideas.
Oh, they will for sure.
100%. I'm trying to be gracious to say that. You know me, I know what's
Yeah,
popping.
nah.
They're going to
There's
use the Bible to reinforce. This is a theological conference. They have atheists and people who are not pastors at all. Speakers. I wouldn't go to a pastor's conference unless there were pastors that I trusted there personally. So here you have this. Let me impose on your conscience, because if I can impose on your conscience, I impose on the way you understand
hold
morality,
on.
right?
You just said something right there. I think that kind of needs to be expounded on a little bit when you talked about you wouldn't go unless you knew who was talking. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So the celebrity aspect of it again, as far as who can we bring in to champion our movement that's going
Mm-hmm.
to draw people in. I mean, that's when we talk about me with, back to the fundamentalism episode that we did last year.
Yeah.
That's how I got drawn in pretty much. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's how I remember. Real quick, I remember having the discussion when you talk about imposing upon people's consciences. I had a young man in my office at one time, and we were talking, and he's a young believer, and he's asking me about voting. This is back in 2016, and he's telling me he's going to vote Democrat. So my reaction to him is to begin to play the devil's advocate on, or in my mind at that time, God's advocate. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, fam, you can't vote that way because babies are dying. You know what I'm saying? So I hit him with why was I doing that? Unbeknownst to me at the time, now looking back, I was obviously imposing upon his conscience. Like, fam, you love babies. Like, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what's happening if you vote that route. Now, fast forward, going back to the fundamentalism thing, when I say this is what happened to me is because when I came out of the charismatic movement that was twisted, it was a twisted movement, word of faith, stuff like that. When I came out of that, I obviously went to what a lot of people did, this cage stage thing, right? Calvinism, like Reformed theology. And that lasted for a little bit, but the diving into the doctrines of grace lasted for a while. So of course at the time, I needed to learn this from people who were teaching this, because the people connected to me were learning this understanding of scripture from this perspective, the doctrines of grace, at the same time as I was, pretty much. You know what I'm saying? Like the ones that I look to as leaders. So I had to learn this from somewhere. So where did I go to? I went to those within the Reformed faith, you know what I'm saying, that would be espoused as the leaders, as the big timers, you know what I'm saying? And they held, and even podcasts like smaller, like what do you call them? Discernment podcasts. You know what I'm saying? Like they were reformed. You know what I'm saying? They held to the doctrines of grace. So they were safe. You could listen to them. So you start taking all this information in, and it's imposing upon your conscience. And now before you know it, the same energy that went into you leaving what you knew was bad doctrine and you knew was unbiblical, the same energy that went into disliking that because you felt like you were being lied to gets carried right into what you're learning next, after, and alongside of the doctrines of grace.
Right.
So with that energy comes a big like boost of self-righteousness. You know what I'm saying? Because not only are you wailing the flag of, yo, like y'all are lost over there, charismatics, like y'all got it twisted, like you got to come over here. Not only do you got that banner you're waving, but then on top of that, you got the, yo, y'all are voting Democrat, like, yo, come over here. You know what I'm saying? Now, and you're just building upon this righteous stance that you have, and you're not realizing that you stopped loving your brothers in the process.
100%.
Yeah, that's
Bro,
real.
that's it. And I think that's what the imposition does. That's what the Neo Commission does, right?
Right.
You make disciples and you impose on people's consciences. When I impose on your conscience, I impose on your morality, right? Your morality, your understanding of good and evil. If I impose on your morality, then I control your obedience.
Facts.
If I can impose on your morality, I control your obedience. So in Strack's example, what's more important is to tell that person they're not a Christian if they vote Democrat, rather than see that as one, could be a discipleship issue that you feel like, hey, but two, it's adding to someone's the truth of the gospel with a lie by making it seem like, look, the people are gonna go to hell for many reasons. I think voting Democrat is just not gonna be one of them.
Right.
And let me just say this before people who hear this and think that we're not saying some of them we're not. Let me make sure you understand what I'm saying. When you stand before God, God knows us completely and fully. He knows what you really supported and what you really believed in. He knows that we're in essentially a two-party system with a bunch of guck in the middle of it, right? He knows that. He knows if you vote Republican, what you're really supporting and what you're really for. He knows if you're doing it because you hate the left and you hate and you support white support, all these things. He understands that. Voting Republican, whether you think it's more godlier or not because of the values, doesn't mean anything in the eyes of God because he knows the heart of the people. He knows if you vote Democrat that you're going, that he knows if you support all the evil things that the platform supports. We don't have the luxury of picking and choosing what issues we support in our system. They're partied, right? They're political ideologies. So you might bang with these two things, and but not the rest of them. But the only way you can get at these two things is to get all of them. Is to vote for this, right? So you get thrown in. So this is what I'm saying. Like every believer, like you don't need to be afraid of these things because the Lord knows. I know you didn't support this.
Right.
I know you weren't for that.
I mean, to bank on what you're saying right now, like even with the Sermon on the Mount, as we call it, the Lord dealt with heart issues from the law, right? So he took the law and was like, yo, these are heart issues.
100%.
This is what I'm really dealing with now, you know, the heart issues. So what we're doing by throwing this voter identity on people, as far as soteriology is concerned, what we're doing is taking them back to the law. Like, yo, you vote this way, you're not a Christian. You know what I'm saying? You can't be. That's that, fam. You sound like the Judaizers.
100%,
you know what I'm saying?
Bro.
Like you sound like those who were doing that. Like who bewitched you? You know what I'm saying? You fool. Like that's what it sounds like. So that needs to be thought about.
No. And this is why it's important, because if I can impose on your conscience, right? That's the incarnation to make you. If I impose on your conscience, I control your morality. If I control your understanding of morality, I control your obedience. And if I control your obedience, then I control your attitude and conform you to the image of my spirit, not the spirit.
Because you're God, basically.
That's what happens. And that's what happens. And so, and we use these people. So, like, you use like John MacArthur types have all this power. And it's like, man, you just some, man, what? You a sinful man like everybody else. Right. Eric Mason, oh, you a sinful dude like everybody else. I mean, whoever you can think of, right? I'm talking about Christians now. It doesn't really matter. All these people are going to stand before God and give an account, like all of us, right?
Right.
So when I can control your obedience, then I conform your attitude and your actions to the image of my spirit, not the spirit. And this is why you have people who don't even think about. I mean, Jesus, what did Jesus say in Matthew 5? If you say raka, you fool to your brother, right? You're liable to go to hell. Bama's don't even think about that. They just be going in on you on posts on Facebook and all this stuff. And mind you, listen, sometimes your tone can be misunderstood or interpreted in what you post. I get that sometimes. We don't always know what people's tone are, what they're meant. But a lot of the vitriol, a lot of the judgment, a lot of the insult is our hearts, right? Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, or the hands type. You know what I'm saying? Out of the overflow of the heart, the hands type. So the things that you say are really what's in the heart, right? So when you impose this, and this is the Neo Great Commission, this is why Turning Point USA is having these types of conferences. This is why all these sides are trying to get people to come to these conferences to talk about things from a theological lens. No one is doing conferences about how do you love your neighbor as yourself. No one is doing conferences on the golden rule, treating others. No one's doing that. No one's doing, you know why? Because people won't show up to that. Believers are so conformed to the image of this world through this theological gospel. Yes, they're still Christians, but they process everything through it. So every fear. So you're more worried about losing freedoms. Don't get me wrong. I love my country. I don't want to live anywhere else. And there's stuff I don't want to happen. But let me be clear. There's not a verse in the Bible that I can point to that says that God does not intend to have us lose our constitutional freedoms. There's no, what I do know is what we've said before, stuff like, indeed, all who desire to live a godly life will be persecuted, 2 Timothy 3:12. Yeah. I do know trials of various kinds in James 2-4. Like I see Jesus talking to the letters saying, persevere to the end, conquer to the end, right? I see Paul saying, I fought the good fight of faith and the crown awaits me. And I see that. I don't see what I enjoy. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I don't see, and this is what I mean. When you talk about take back our country for God, you're talking to a God who said, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool.
Facts.
What temple could you build for me? What country can you take back for me? Yeah. Like, I prepared a better place for you. But this is what happens in the theological gospel. It's all about the left. And so you impose on your brother's conscience. It's the imposition. And this is what interaction is like in the body. And if I can impose on your conscience, I control your morality. If I control your morality, your understanding of good and evil, I control your obedience. If I control your obedience, then you become conformed to what I say you should be worried about or care about than the scriptures. And this is where we're at.
We have an abundance of evidence on the other side that the Lord builds up and tears down nations as he pleases. Mm-hmm. So we need to not just be willing, but I mean, eagerly desire for the Lord's will to be done. If that means tearing down this nation. I mean, if you think about your own life, like, would you lay down your life for one soul to be saved? If the Lord came to you and was like, yo, this one person will be saved if you lay down your life and die. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll hear the gospel through this example of your life, whatever the case may be. Why wouldn't you? You know what I'm saying? Like a Christian, you would lay down your life. You would desire to do so.
You know what's crazy about what you're saying right now? Is I can't remember where I read this, if it's a poll or if it's just a poll in my own mind. But I remember reading someplace that like Christians, the percentage was really high, are afraid to die. Like this is I think the impact of part of the theological gospel, right? If you're a believer right now watching this live or watching it later, whatever, if you're a genuine believer, then you have confidence to some degree. Part of your faith says that when I die, I'm going to heaven, right? So when Jesus said to the thief on the cross, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise, we extend that to us. Thief on the cross did no obedience. All he did was acknowledge that Jesus was who he said he was. No acts of obedience, nothing for God's glory except that he gets to paradise, right? You and I and many of us, we've been doing many things trying to honor the Lord in many different ways, right? So you see this happening. When you talk to Christians about dying, there is a fear of dying. Even though the scripture says to die is gain. Right? Paul said, look, I'd live to stay with you all, but to die is gain. To be with the Lord is far better. Part of that's 1 Corinthians 15. Death, where is your sting? Like Hebrews, chapter 2, where he came to rescue those who were taken captive by Satan by the fear of death. You see, many Christians are afraid to die. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about having a death wish. I got a wife and 3 children. I love them. I would love to be around to see my boys grow up, get married, and see who they become. That's not what I mean. But I'm not afraid to die, though. When I'm on an airplane and the turbulence is high, I was just like, all right, Lord, I guess this is it. Like, I'm not. But Christians are paralyzed, afraid to die, afraid to lose this. You know why? Because we're so connected to the American dream that heaven is actually a nightmare. Heaven is boring. The thought of being with Jesus in eternity is not as exciting as living here and fighting over stupid things.
You know what, though? I mean, really, Psalm 1 really hits it hard on the head, man. Meditating on the word of the Lord day and night. Like I was contemplating the other day, thinking, if I didn't have, or let's say where else am I gonna build my morality? Where else am I gonna build my understanding of existence and how to live and how to love and how to care for people and how to be unselfish and what comes next? Like, I have no idea where to grab these things from aside from God's word. So we must be in God's word. I mean, and when you say that poll about people fearing death who are, professing Christians, they probably would fail on the poll of if they're reading God's word or not. You know what I'm saying? They probably would be on the side of, yeah, I might read every now and then, but I don't really read the Bible all like that, because this is how the Bible talks about death. Like the Bible very clearly presents death as a gateway into eternal glory with the Father, the Son, and the Spirit of God. I mean, that's you're carried, and actually we don't even see death. You know what I'm saying? Like, we close our eyes and die and wake up before the Lord. There is not like a process of we're in dead phase for a while. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and this is the theological gospel. This is one of the backbones of it. It's anti-suffering.
Right.
This is what gets people so fired up about politics, is the possibility of suffering, because suffering is losing comforts that I'm gonna have, having to make adjustments because the school systems are doing this, or having to do this, or having to do that, and angry at gas prices, and then all these different things, right?
Isn't that what brings about all selfishness?
Huh?
All selfishness comes from not wanting to suffer.
100%. And I mean, and that's the way of the cross, right? But that's what I'm saying. The theological gospel imposes on your conscience with the slogan, if you listen to me, we won't suffer. We
Right.
won't have to deal with this. Our
That's the
suffering,
marketing campaign. That's the
100%, right?
campaign.
It's
Yeah.
our suffering is the result of the left or the
Mm.
right. But God is sovereign over the left and the right. God is ambidextrous, ladies and gentlemen. He's sovereign over the left and the right.
Yo, that's crazy. That when you say that, like, because both sides would yell, one to maintain their status so that they don't suffer, the other to overcome the other so that they don't suffer.
100%.
So it's all
It's
about
all,
not suffering.
but what have we said? Theolitical God is moral high ground ideology.
Right.
It's I'm better than you because I care about abortion. I care about closed borders. I care about limited government. I'm better than you because I care about LGBT rights. I care about racial injustice. It's all moral high ground ideology. None of it has to do with Christ. A lot of it really is just it's helping us. It's feeding into the idol of comfort that Kara was talking about that I just put on the screen that we have. Right, we have
Mm-hmm.
that, and so now we don't want to lose the comforts
Right.
even though heaven is a great, and so we don't want to suffer without any guarantee. So having said that, listen,
I mean, we
in
talked
the
about that a lot. We talked about that a lot during the whole COVID thing.
we
When
did
everything was
100%
all the time. Like,
because that's what God was exposing. That's what He was
right.
exposing.
Right.
It's like that, like
Self-preservation.
I mean, this is how you
Self-preservation.
know if you did a poll on how people want to die. I think the majority of people would say in their sleep.
For sure.
Everyone wants to die comfortably and then spend eternity in heaven. I think a lot of Christians don't even really care about Jesus being there. They just want to go to heaven. Right? Remember Shy's song, that Psalm 73 joint?
Wow.
People don't want to go see Jesus. They just want to escape the left or the right or don't suffer or don't. People don't even, and that's why I think the Lord knows that. As believers, you better train yourself to want to be and see Jesus, fam.
I mean, he says
Because
they
if
praise
you
me with
do
their
not,
mouths, but their hearts are far from me.
that's the statement of the eternity.
Wow.
These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. You gotta make sure, not just in, and he said, not just lips, right? He said heart. What's the heart? What do you
Mm-hmm.
mean by that? The morality, the desires, these
Right.
things, right? If you're so rude, if love doesn't insist on its own way, it's not rude. It's not. We gotta question ourselves, man. We gotta
Mm-hmm.
really ask ourselves, what is? I'm not talking about your sinless perfection on this side of glory. What I'm talking about is soul management. Let me make sure I'm on my. Let me make sure I'm on my game. Let me make
Sinless
sure I'm.
progression. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like, yeah,
right. It's like that. Christ was sinless so that we could sin less, right?
less. Right.
So that's what we're trying to do, right? And the grace is there for us, but we live in this culture where like if your conscience is going to be imposed on, and unless you're mature enough to say, you know what, I'm staying balanced. I think stay balanced is not a position; it's a statement of maturity. Because what I'm saying is, we recognize there's evil on all sides, and I'm not going to allow myself to get so embedded into one ideology or one that I'm willing to act outside of the fruits of the spirit
Yeah.
consistently. And then because once you do it consistently, it becomes blindly. I don't even know I'm doing it.
Right.
People just be wilding.
That's why people, who say stay balanced or would hashtag it or hold to that statement are ridiculed and looked at as the coward because they're the antithesis. You know what I'm saying? That those who would say stay balanced are the antithesis to those who would impose upon conscience.
100%.
You know what I'm
100%.
saying? Because we're not cool with rocking with that. So
Mm-hmm.
that
It is.
they understand that we make people think about what they're doing. Forget that what they're appealing to as far as your conscience is concerned. Think well about what they're saying to you and the processes that are involved.
And you know what's funny, Strack? So this is what was interesting to me about the video I did 2 days ago that Ruslan told people to check out. And then, a bunch of people have been looking at it and I've been encouraged. But if I read the comment section, which I said I'm not going to do, feel free to go. If you're watching this, go to the channel, look at the video was called, I hate to say I told you so, but that's the name of the video. If you read the comment section, look at how many people have said, wow, I just didn't realize how much I was drawn into this until I watched this video. Now, I'm not
Right.
saying this because I'm trying to draw attention to me. I'm drawing attention to the blindness that happens to a lot of us
Right.
because there's not enough people saying, slow down. Whoa. So this isn't about what I said. There are way better people that are better communicators than me. It has nothing to do with, but it's about that not enough people are saying it. So for
Right.
some people, when you read their comment, it was like a breath of fresh air. I mean, we got 500 subscribers in less than 2 days because people want to hear something different. So if you're one of
Mm-hmm.
the people that keep hearing us say this stuff and are tired of hearing it, thanks for the memories. There's a ton of people that recognize I need this type of smoke because they
Right.
see it. And this is what you'll hear. I couldn't put words to it, but you said it eloquently. I'm not even that eloquent. What they're really saying is that not enough people are saying what I'm hearing you say,
Yeah. You
and it
actually said it.
feels good.
Right.
That's the
Saying
issue.
it and saying it plainly. You know, saying it
Plainly.
plainly
And that's
matters.
what you're gonna get with cross examine. We're gonna tell you what we think, and if we're wrong, we're wrong. Well, I don't mind owning being wrong. I'm not Jesus. I don't gotta be wrong. All right, let's move on to two specific ways that the imposition has worked in the church. Two specific ways. So with the Neo Commission, which is go into all the church, not the world, go into all the church and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of whatever political party that you're a part of, right? So then you got the ROI. Let me tell you what ROI is. So in the business world, ROI is basically a three-letter acronym that describes return on investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a corporation, you make a product, you make an iPhone, right? That's you know when you hear like, oh, Apple gave out their quarterly projections, right? You have a product and you make it and it costs a certain amount to make. You're going to sell it for a certain amount and that money that you get back is essentially your return on investment. Like this is what we put in, here's what we get back, right? It's ROI. It's a business term. Everyone knows this term if you're into business, right? So return on investment, and it's a good thing if you run a corporate. Strack, you have a restaurant. If
Mm-hmm.
someone says, "Hey, man, we need you. Won't you buy this meat over here? This beef is actually better than that beef, but that beef costs $500 more than the beef that you've been using." It might not be a good return on investment, right?
No.
You're just gonna be like, I don't think we're gonna do that. Thanks for letting us know that, though, but we're not gonna do it, right?
Right.
So this ROI, return on investment, has happened in the church. Now, years ago, when I was in this mega church, 4,000 people, and I was on staff at this church, I was an intern there. We read this book called Good to Great by Chip and Dan Heath, I think. And it was because we were a mega church. We read this book, and the book was essentially a business book. How did some companies go from good to great? Like what made, there were a lot of soda companies that started when Coca-Cola did. What made Coke persevere and like these other companies not? Or they get bought
Coke.
by Coke, right? Huh?
No,
What'd
I
you
just
say?
said Coke. Coke made them
Okay, Coke.
persevere.
Right. Well, Coke, there's a lot of reasons why Coke perseveres.
Well,
Some
they used
people,
to have real Coke in that joint
exactly. That's why
when
I
they
said there's a
started
lot of
out.
reasons.
Yeah, that's what made them
But
persevere.
like there's so this book was about how companies went from good to great and some of the steps. And we read that as a staff. There were like 20 something pastors on staff at this mega church of 4,000 people. So there was and we would study churches like that had big, I forgot some of the name, Bill Hybels church and these churches that had these big sort of corporate model, right?
That's the
There was a
pragmatism.
corporate model, huh?
Pragmatism.
Yeah,
You know, say
pragmatism,
that's
but
that.
but,
Yeah,
but that pragmatism 100%. But it's very broad to say that. So I'm being specific in the kind of
got you,
pragmatism that it
got you.
was. It was a corporate model where we're trying to figure out. So they had this idea of getting the right people on the right bus, and I liked it. Don't get me wrong; it wasn't like you can't apply it, but there was this sense where we need to kind of run this thing like a Fortune 500 company. Like we're looking at
Mm-hmm.
business models, we have projections, budgets. Everything is about sort of a return on investment, right? So this is why you have to. And when I say you, I don't. I'm just meaning in general. This is why pastors will during the every week will give sometimes a little pep talk to help people give, right? Because you need that money so that you can pay salaries and different things like that, right? There's a return on investment corporate. Well, it started with sort of the Fortune 500 model. Well, we got to do this, but we need results. We need results. So here's what would happen then. What you would do is stuff like this. Let's do car washes, right? So let's have the youth stand on the corner, and you've driven by and you see these people go, hey, and they'll wash your car for free. Nothing. It's a church. They want you to come in, or you go to like a metro transit. Maybe we have subways where we are, like trains that go underground. We call them subways and whatever. You go there and people are handing you water bottles, and when you look on the label, it's the name of a church and the address and all this stuff, right? People would do that. There was a period where people were thinking of all these creative ways to do that, but what happened was people weren't getting saved. See, the return on investment was people coming to the church. Mm-hmm. So we stopped doing it at the church we were at. We stopped washing cars because there wasn't a return on investment. We weren't thinking, hey, like Paul in 1 Corinthians 3:7, Apollos watered, I watered, Apollos planted, but God causes the growth. We weren't thinking that, hey, you know what? 6 months from now, this person may have a crisis. And they're gonna remember that we washed their car or gave them a water bottle, and they might come into the church. We were thinking about, well, how many people did anyone talk about the church? Yeah, we gave out a lot of cards and got people's information, and you're following up with people, and no one's interested. No return on investment, and so you feel like we're not doing anything right. Somebody put in the comment section earlier, Matthew 25. He said this. Look, whatever you did for the least of these brothers, you did. Sisters of mine, you did for me. Like Jesus doesn't say, listen, when you do this, I mean, think about Jesus' return on investment. Think of all the people that Jesus healed, demons he cast out, people that Jesus fed. They didn't even believe in him.
Fam, I'm about to be preaching on Sunday on Luke 17:11 with the 10 lepers. Only 100%. One came back.
One came back. And Jesus even said, where are the other 9?
Where's the other 9?
And that leper was a foreigner, if I'm not mistaken. Right. He was a Gentile. He wasn't even a Jew.
Not yet. I mean, not just a foreigner. He was a Samaritan.
100%.
Which adds to it a little bit more. You know what I'm saying?
Wah, wah, wah. So what you have is, in the biblical sense, the return on investment is not if people get saved or not. It's that you did this unto the Lord and you blessed people that he was close to. Right. But in the ROI sort of corporate church model, you don't want to do these things unless people get saved. So this was a big deal happening in the early 2000s.
You have to maintain the well-oiled machine.
100%. You know what
I'm saying? You got to keep the machine going so everybody keeps getting paid.
Yeah, it's result. It was just results. It was about results. Like how many people are getting, how many people, all of that, right? Then that corporate model transitions from corporate to political. Mm-hmm. Right. So now it's the same. It's results by any means necessary. Right. And it's the same model. What's the return on investment? We got it. So in the corporate model, it was more about, it was income based. It was about making sure that people are coming in, money's coming out. Like that's the corporate model. Corporate's about money and making money. And so there was a sense of you're wasting money if you're going to buy water bottles that people drink, but no one gets saved. Why does it matter? Well, because of those people become members and they become givers of the church and so forth, right? So the corporate model was income based, but in a political model, it becomes morality based, right? It's about right and wrong. So now it's results by any means necessary. So on both sides, it's all fear. They're going to take away your rights. They're going to take away your country. They're going to take back. They're going to do this. They don't care about you. They don't love you. It's all this language that gets you it's mostly fear language. And then when you're tired of being afraid, you get angry. Yeah. Like you ever had someone walk up to you and scare you when you weren't paying attention? Boom! And you'd be like, damn it, don't do that. You get mad for a second because you don't like to be afraid. People don't like to live in fear. So when you start to live in fear over time, human nature is going to kick in and you're going to get offended. They say this phrase where you back a puppy against the wall and then they're going to attack, right? It's going to happen. You're going to be, and this is what happens in this new political theolitical model. We went from corporate ROI to theolitical. Now in the political ROI, what's the return on investment? We got to get votes. We got to get people to believe that they're evil so that it's all morality based.
And the church is a political sledgehammer. I mean, when it gets swung, it moves, and people within the church assume that everyone in the church must think the same. When it comes to political issues. Right? Yeah, because if we don't, then it's not a political sledgehammer anymore. Mm-mm. You know what I'm saying?
There's strength in numbers, right?
Right. There's strength in numbers. And when you talk about the church, the church itself is used to the appeal to conscience because scripture appeals to conscience, because the Lord appeals to conscience. So we're used to that. The thing is, the Lord is holy. So when he's appealing to your conscience, he's doing so in a holy manner. You know what I'm saying? He's not trying to manipulate you to evil. That's different than when man does so, because man is a liar.
Well, he's appealing to the conscience that you should have because you have faith in him.
Facts.
That's what the Lord
That's what I'm
does.
talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, the church. Yeah.
Right. And then but in the imposition, they appeal to the conscience they want you to have so that you can be like them to get what they want from you. Right. So you got this. Let me tell you one of the clear ways I saw this work. I've been to many pastors' conferences in my 20 years of ministry. And one of the clearest ways that I saw this sort of return on investment work was when we be at churches. This might have happened to you. You might have done this as a member or if you're a pastor watching or something. And this question always comes up. If you say you lead a church, well, maybe they don't ask this question now. This question was automatic if you said you led a church or were a pastor of a church. Here's what you would hear next. How big is your church?
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the next questions. How big is your church? And I watched men feel ashamed because they might be like, oh, our church is just like 60 people. We're kind of a newer church, so we're only at about 100, 150. I heard this happen. I saw many pastors almost feel ashamed that their churches weren't huge. Fam.
Cats be squirming.
60 people is a lot of people, fam.
Yeah.
30 people is a lot of souls, fam.
Word up.
In Acts 20, right, Paul was saying goodbye to the Ephesian elders. And this is what he said in Acts 20, verses 28. Here's what Paul said to them. One verse. He said, be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has appointed you as overseers, to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. Now, if you know anything about Acts, you know that they were a lot of house churches. There were a lot of churches that were just meeting in houses. They didn't have, what happened at Pentecost, 3,000 were added to that number. They didn't stay in mega church. They were just all together and people believed, but eventually they all went back to where they were from. They all went back to whatever regions they were lived in, and those churches were considerably smaller. They were house churches, many of them. So you're talking about 10 people maybe in a church.
Right.
And so when he's talking to the Ephesians elders, saying that to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood, he was talking to them about a handful of people, maybe a dozen, maybe 24 people. And that was his perspective. And I've seen pastors be ashamed as if somehow their church is not, they're hoping that it gets larger. For what? So you could be more responsible for people's souls?
We over here 30 to 40 strong every Sunday, fam. That's just how we get down. You know what I mean? And if one family ain't there, like, forget it. If Pastor Eric and his family ain't going to be there that Sunday, we half this church. You know what I'm saying? Because they 10 deep. So, yeah, we serve the Lord and love him as small as we are in a very passionate.
Man, I've been in your church. I appreciate your church, man. Y'all get it in.
I
could grow in that church, bro.
Yeah.
I could grow in your church, fam.
We love each other, man.
Yeah, that's what, man, listen, fam. I watch pastors be ashamed because this corporate or return on investment model. And I'll never forget this. It was at Together for the Gospel. It was the first year they brought Matt Chandler out, right after he went through the cancer. He had to shave his hair. He was bald, all that. Matt Chandler, he's sort of a straight talker, right? He got up there and said, listen, the only reason why I'm here is because I have a large church. And Mark Deb was like, no, brother, that's not true, brother. No, brother. And he was like, don't listen to him. That's the main reason why I'm here. He said, many of you guys wouldn't be up here because you don't have large churches. And the guys were laughing. He was speaking the truth.
Yeah.
He was speaking the truth. Largely, and that's the celebrity pastor model, right?
I mean, that's the same in the game with MCing, fam. Like, you ain't getting featured on joints unless you got a nice following. It's just real rap.
That's it. I mean, even if books like that, if you want to write a book, a publishing company, now I get it, they're a business. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
look at your Twitter following. If you have under 10,000 followers, they might be like, because they're thinking return on investment. This is what you do.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. I have no problem with capitalism, but it's going to drive everything. It's in every facet
it's the nature of the
of our.
beast.
It's the nature of the beast. It's just it's in every facet, and it's the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So
Mm-hmm.
what you have is this return on investment model that began as corporate, but then became political, and it's by any means necessary.
Mm.
By any means necessary, we want to get people in. We want results by any means necessary. So if it was money, if it was votes, if it was, and voting is really power. Both of those things have to do with power. Money and morality are all about power. This is about power. Well, that's a different conversation
Comfort,
because
convenience.
we can go down that way. That's a different conversation. But I watch people be ashamed of the size of their churches, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and you shouldn't be ashamed.
Can you imagine
Don't be
standing
ashamed of your
next to your
church at all.
pastor and your pastor responds that way with shame? Like, that
How would
would
you
be
feel?
kind of crazy. Yeah.
That's one of the ways that the imposition has affected people, and this return on investment, and then it's just I'm ashamed of my church. I'm ashamed.
Mm.
Another way, and this is one. This is where so the ROI was more corporate. This one is more political. So it's called the new numerology, right? It's the epistemology of ratios and wisdom. All right, let me tell you how this works. I'm going to use this example because this example happens all the time. Let me tell you what I mean by this. The new numerology, right? This is how this works. You, let's just say you agree, you're concerned about police shooting unarmed black men, right? That's what you say. And you're passionate about it. You care about it. And then someone will say to you, okay, police shot 139 black people last year, but there were 340,000 babies murdered by abortion last year. Why aren't you caring about that? Something like that. It'll be something to that effect. So what they're basically saying is the number of murders that happen here that you care about means nothing to the number of murders that happen here. This is the new numerology.
In
It
comparison,
is,
for sure.
huh?
In
Yeah, it's comparison.
Yeah, they
It's
went.
comparison. But it's the epistemology, it's ratios and comparisons, right?
Right.
Let me
Right.
tell you why this is a problem. And this happens all the time. Some of y'all probably watching have done it to me when I've said something. Here's the logic. You should care more about this because more people have been affected by this than this. Right? Now, staying with the analogy of police shooting, one difference is with abortion, though, that's someone's choice. They chose to do that. Like, no one wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to get killed by law enforcement today. Like, that wasn't their choice. That was something that happened to them. Now, you could say, well, it was their choice by their actions. In some cases, yeah, that maybe was the case, but not all those cases, right? But the logic is this. You should care. Why do you even care about this? Because this barely happens as opposed to this. All right? Here's the problem with that from a Christian perspective. Here's a problem with that from a Christian perspective. You have God cares about the many and he cares about the one. All right? So let me prove this. So here's God caring about the many. We all aware of the book of Jonah. Jonah's a great book, 4 chapters. At the very end, the very last verse of Jonah, here's what God says to Jonah. Because Jonah, real quick, God says, go to Nineveh. Jonah doesn't want to go because Nineveh, which is modern day Iraq, right? Modern day Iraq. They have slaughtered Jews. He hates them. He doesn't want to go. He gets on a boat, goes the opposite direction. God causes a storm. He recognizes it's his disobedience. The men throw him overboard and a big fish, whale, whatever, swallows him. He's in there for 3 days, right? The sign of Jonah, 3 days, right? Mm-hmm. He's in there for 3 days. God spits him back out. He goes in Nineveh, preaches the gospel, and basically says, in 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. That was a great gospel presentation. The people repent anyway. They get out and edict and people in sackcloth and ashes. And then God it's very hot where he is, so God makes a vine to block him in the shade, and he falls asleep. Then God sends a worm to eat the vine while he's sleeping, and then he wakes up and is hot and he's arguing. He's angry at God for saving Nineveh. He's angry at God. Like, I knew you were going to save them. I knew that this was the kind of God you were. And here's how this is what God says to him at the very end. He says this. So may I not care about the great city of Nineveh, which has more than 120,000 people who cannot distinguish between their right and their left, as well as many animals? Right. So God's saying you're more upset at this vine that I gave you and took away than you are about all these people that need to know me that would be going to perish. Right. So
Right.
God clearly cares about the many. All right. But God also cares about the one.
Yeah.
Here's what Luke 15:7 says.
Before you go past Jonah, real quick, Jonah denied the very thing he appealed to in chapter 2 when he was in the fish and he was crying out to the Lord for his mercy. Mm-hmm. He did not want God to be merciful to Nineveh.
Right.
That's at the bottom of the ocean, in the middle of that fish, he was crying out to the Lord, begging for his mercy, admitting his wrong.
Mm-hmm. And he was offended when God showed mercy to others.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's funny you bring that up, because I would say that is a modern day good picture of what the Theolitical gospel does and how the imposition works. It's I'm offended at any progress that those people are making, the opposite side.
Covetousness?
As if God,
Covetousness?
Yeah, but I'm offended at what they get, as if God isn't sovereign over them too.
Right.
God is sovereign over the left and the right. He's sovereign over all of it, right? So you have, God cares about the many, 120,000 people in there. And he says, even in there, many animals. Mm-hmm. So I even care about these animals. Then you have in Luke 15, verse 7, God cares about the one. It says this, I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need repentance. So here, Jesus is giving us a glimpse into heaven, saying that there is more joy over one sinner who repents. You think about heaven as this massive place. You don't even know if they're aware of what's happening here. This massive place with angelic beings. Jesus is there. The Spirit is there. The Father's there. Some of our friends and family members are there waiting for us, right? This massive entity in eternity. And Jesus says that heaven rejoices over one sinner who repents, right? So you have the many and the one that God clearly cares about. As imitators of God, we care about the many and the one, because the many are just a bunch of ones. They're a bunch of individuals, the many and the one. In the imposition, the strategy is to use ratios, numerology, comparison. How could you care about that? We're supposed to care about that. We're allowed to care about the one dude, the lower number of people, because that still matters. It's still loss of life. It's not a murder that's it's not like God's going to round up all the nations and be like, all right, the black community, y'all aborted this many babies, and this community. That's not. Everyone will give an individual account for their actions. But see, when you impose it as the incarnation, right? You impose on people's conscience, you get people thinking that numbers matter. But numbers matter in politics because you need votes. Mm-hmm. You need outcome. And whoever, right. and numbers in politics, how many votes did we get? Well, that's who wins. Let's do Majority a recount. That's it. Majority rules. Yeah. That's the reality. And so when you see this, you realize, oh, wow, this is a hustle. This imposing on my conscience to focus on numbers, like, oh, I shouldn't care about this at all. And this is what happens. This is what happened in a lot of the racial, whatever side you were on, about social justice, whatever, woke on, I don't care. Here's what happened, is you had this numerology, right? This sinful comparison, these ratio, the new numerology was to have people not care about this individual, because I care about all these people. But the problem is, you don't even know or seen these people. You care about the idea of what's happening. Here's a person that you could actually watch and see what happened on a video when those things come out. Like, loving your neighbor, like caring about the unborn, is an application of caring about those who are born as well. It's not like, oh, and if you say, well, this is the thing, and this is one mistake I made. Like, I did not bang with Black Lives Matter at all. So that's no mystery. Me and Strack had Abraham Hamilton on the show in season 3, and we walked through about how they into witchcraft and all of it. I did not bang with them. And I told you on the episode not too long ago that one of the main reasons why I didn't like them is because they hijacked real pain and made it about themselves. Right. And they made it about an agenda that most black people don't care about, no Marxism and stuff like that. There was real pain. I can't stand Black Lives Matter for that. I've never supported them. It's sad I got to say that, because whenever you say something in a reality of black struggle, they immediately throw you in, because that's what you have to do. You have to throw me in this box and the numbers and all that stuff. So I didn't bang with BLM at all. But one thing I did wrong, here's one thing I did wrong. I accused them of being a fraud because they didn't say anything about black on black crime and abortion. That was a conservative talking point, right? Before all of the money stuff was exposed about BLM, before that came out, before we knew what was going on, there was all this pushback, right? And I remember putting posts up like, man, these people don't care about Black Lives Matter. What about this? What about that? What about that? But here's the reality, though. Black Lives Matter never said we're here to talk about every black. They were very specific in what they cared about. It was when law enforcement takes the lives of black men or black people, and there's no consequences for it. That was their angle. But they got attacked for their not caring about all this stuff. But yet, if you're pro-life, when people say, oh, you guys aren't pro-life, you're pro-birth because you don't care about people outside the womb. Well, they say, well, no, we care about abortion because it's this and that. That's your focus. And it's not wrong. It's not wrong for you to care about this particular demographic, because we don't have the capacity to care about everything equally. We're going to have things that affect us more. There are things that affect Strack that don't affect me in the same way. I think abortion is evil, but I don't weep at abortion like my brother might. I don't cry. There are other things. I'm more concerned with the lives of people and them being treated unjustly that I can see that have affected the world, not the unborn that someone made a decision, that my mom made a decision or were forced to make a decision that never interacted in the world. I think it's evil, but I'm not as emotionally connected as my homie right here is. I've seen this man. You've seen this man on this show be affected. We've never judged each other thinking we got to have the same response to that. But in the imposition, that's how they get you. Oh, how could you care about this? So even recently, this brother that I follow, the point was basically, they were like, man, only 100-something black people were killed. Oh, in the video I made, someone was like, one comment was like, so 139 black people were killed last year and 340,000 abortions. Like, how are you comparing the two? Who cares? I'm allowed to care about the one. If heaven rejoices when one sinner repents, then I can mourn when one person is killed. We're supposed to be that way, right? Mm-hmm. But in this imposition, the new numerology, the numbers matter. But to God, all lives matter, including black lives, and all lives matter from the womb to the tomb. But you're allowed to care about things more than others. People don't talk about prostate cancer or throat cancer in the same way they do breast cancer? Right. I feel like breast cancer gets all the vibes. If I end up getting another kind of cancer, I'm gonna be like, dang, ain't nobody talking about this. I got throat cancer, and I don't never see no marches for no throat cancer. But you will see breast cancer survivor, the little pink ribbon NFL players wear them on their joint.
That's the tied to the feminist movement.
Right. You know, that's true. That is tied to that 100%. But my point is this, though. You're allowed to care about breast cancer. Mm-hmm. You don't have to equally care about Lou Gehrig's disease because you care about this or that. But in the imposition, the way that they try to manipulate you as a believer, the way the Neo Commission, the way we make disciples of all the going to all the church is to impose on your conscience that you must care about the numbers more than anything, right? So if more because more babies get aborted as far as we know, and to be honest with you, the only reason why we know those numbers is because the organization reports them. They could be lying for all we know. I have no idea. There's no one that can prove that these numbers are accurate. We have no idea. We're taking our
They're
cues from
probably
the
a
people who do.
lot higher.
Huh? They're
They're
probably
probably
way
a lot
higher.
higher.
Or they could
Yeah.
not. Who knows? We have no idea, right? But the point is like, I don't have to measure things by that. Like, I can care about this particular aspect in society. Like, I struggle with like sex slaves and kids getting kidnapped and stuff like that. That bothers me. I feel that. I probably am more emotional towards stuff like that than I am abortion. I still think abortion is evil. And before
You know
you
what though?
judge me, find it. Before you judge me, find a verse that Paul or Jesus said that we need to weep over these things and care about these things. Like, he doesn't say that. Like, these are just
Numbers
the way I'm wired.
numbers matter for us because they make things more tragic. They make things
Mm-hmm.
more extreme, more
Mm-hmm.
outlandish. You know,
Yes,
that's why as soon as you hear that there was a school shooting, the first things asked is how many people are dead.
100%.
It's going to make it more impactful if there's 19 children than just two. But the
Right.
two should just be weeped about just as much
It
as the
should be weeped about.
19. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality. Is we want everything to be dramatized and
Mm-hmm.
extra more than what it already is, because if it's not bigger and worse than the last one, then it's not really that big of a deal.
Mm-mm.
I mean, that's what has happened with causes that you may not desire or be as passionate about as someone else. Is, well, your numbers ain't as high.
Right.
So what you doing in this game? You can go to another level. Step down,
100%.
homie. You know what I mean?
And that's what happens a
You can't
lot.
come
And,
up here on our level, on our
right.
zone.
And that's moral high ground. Hey, we
Yeah.
care about the bigger tragedy than you do. This is why Strack and I keep talking about this. Listen, there's a lot of things to talk about, and we could obviously pull from, we're pretty decently sharp dudes. Like, we can look at current events and make every episode about what's popping. We don't do that because there's just a lot of people that do it and they do it well. I personally enjoy Ruslan and the way he attacks the current events. I like to peek in to see what he's talking about. I peek in and listen to Ben Shapiro a lot. I peek and listen to Coleman Hughes and Glenn Lowry, and I'm actually listening to more conservatives than I do the left, even though I defend things that typically people say are left. I listen to more conservatives actually than that. So I don't do. We try to explain why things are happening. We care about the body. This podcast cares about the church. So things are going to always come back to the imposition, what's happening, theolitical gospel. We're going to expose it because I assure you, mark my words, and I don't say this with an arrogance like I hope this happens. I say this with a sadness that I hope I'm wrong. In 2 years, in the next election cycle, Christians, I mean, are going to lose their minds. It's going to be vitriolic, chaotic, unbiblical, no fruits of the spirit, no holds barred imposition. You're going to see the incarnation everywhere. Charlie Kirk is just one of them. Just trying to build people into his understanding, his fears, his rights and wrongs of the culture, what's happening in politics. Let me tell you who's ruining politics. Human beings, because we all sinful and fall short of the glory of God. I'm not saying that everything is equal. I'm just saying, don't act like it's just the left. The right ain't right. And if you're on the left, don't act like it's just the right. The left have left. This is why we say what we say, while we do what we do. So listen, we appreciate y'all riding with us, man. This is Strack. You can check him out at hishypeman.com. You know what I'm saying? He got
Yes.
everything, the brush, the beats, the bars. all of
check
it.
that out.
Check it out on Twitter. This is the same Twitter, right, Strack?
Yes, sir.
Hishypeman.com. That's
Yeah,
you on
his hype
Twitter.
man. His hype man.
KirkKennedy.com. Go there, check me out. It's a bunch of stuff there. All my things are there. Would love for y'all to also, don't forget, the link will be in the description for the Substack article, Why Black Lives Matter Was Successful. Give it a read. Get at me. Tell me what you think. Where do you think I was wrong? Where you think I was right? All that good stuff, man. I appreciate y'all. We're so grateful for y'all. Thank you for those that are watching live. Numbers went up and down. I was seesawing over here. Appreciated it. Thank you for some of the comments. Some of them we put up. Obviously, we're in the conversation, so we're not always paying attention to what's happening in the actual comment section. But we appreciate y'all, man, so much. Thank you for all of the new subs, man. Appreciate you. And we got some content coming for you. I know I got another Curse Corner coming real soon. Bust a couple of heads. Not because I'm trying to, but because people are just soft. We are the United Sissies of America in this day and age. And so stuff is just going to happen. All that being said. All right, we appreciate y'all, man. Thanks for riding with us. I'm Kirk Kennedy. He's Strack the Wolverine.
Come on.
And we are out of here, y'all. Grace and peace.
Peace.
Go watch that game. That game's getting ready. Come on. Don't think we didn't end this at the right time because of that.